Um, so the first thing that I really wanted to do on this channel was to talk about why I wanted to do it. I think it's important to to talk to yourself and to talk to others about what your motivations are. Uh, I have a list of what I'm trying to be, and I've got a lot of goals. Like I want to do some public reading or public domain book reading. Um, but I really think it's more important to be for something than against something. A lot of people start because they think they can do it better or differently, or uh, they will be the response to this or that. It's just not who I am. I do like to respond to things. I like to think, but I think if I were to go that direction, it would be hard to not feel disingenuous. Uh, I just want to be careful to present well whatever it is I'm doing. And sometimes it's going to be nonsense. Sometimes it's just going to be pure fun. But I'm not an expert, and I'm not trying to be an expert. I'm just somebody who wants to be useful. I want to do good, and I want to do that within a very specific scope. And so, a while back, I was introduced to a guy named Wilhelmus Abrakel, and I don't know if that's how you say his name, but I think it sounds fancy enough that you might be convinced. And believe me, but he wrote basically a four-volume set of what he intended to be Bible studies. And his motivation in that has affected me. So I'm going to read a little excerpt out of his introduction in this book called The Christian's Reasonable Service. So he's talking about Christian ministers here, and he's talking about their lifespan. So his generally his life generally is of short duration, during which his preaching reaches but a few, and he himself is consumed while illuminating others. The loss of a minister who is endowed with grace is inestimable. God has wonderfully compensated for both the brevity, shortness of a minister's life, as well as the limited scope of his audience, by having given man the wisdom to become acquainted with the art of printing. It should be noted that this began during the time when the church was about to depart from Babylon. This art was brought to perfection precisely when the Reformation dawned at the beginning of the 16th century. Now, a single minister, even centuries after his death, is capable of preaching to an entire nation, yes, even to the entire world. With joyful readiness, I seize this opportunity to preach long after my death, according to the measure of the gifts the Lord has bestowed upon me. I read a little bit more. Prior to the invention of the art of printing, it was necessary to dedicate one's life to an individual of distinction from whom various commissions would originate. This, however, is no longer necessary. At times, these were offensive in nature, and occasionally a work was too insignificant for consideration by the eminent individuals to whom it was dedicated. In addition to this, such dedications many times lent themselves to misinterpretation of the author's intents. Therefore, if I have omitted this and rather addressed this to you, the congregation of God, dedicating my work to you. May this book be of particular service to the congregation which I am currently serving, the congregation I have previously served, as well as the congregation which has twice called me, but was not able to obtain me due to the conditions of the congregation which I was serving at the time. Receive it with affection, and read it diligently and thoughtfully. Form small groups of acquaintances among yourselves for the purpose of reading a chapter or portion each time, and may that which is read present subject matter for edifying discussions. The motivations that he has are large and also very, very small. In one breath, he said that he wanted to preach to the entire world, to all the congregation of God. But then he talks about his local churches to which he served. Um, I don't know what the Lord wants to do with me, but I do feel like the Lord has given me gifts, measured them out upon me in a way that I need to respond to, and I think that's true for all believers. And I think we need to evaluate those things and how the Lord wants to use the gifts that He's given us. Um, I think about the parable of the talents, where the master gives different amounts of money to different people, and they are supposed to go and get a return for them. And when the master comes back, everybody's gotten, doubled basically what the master had given them, except for that one guy who had one talent. He buried it in the ground because he knew that, he says, I knew you were a harsh man. I think there's a lot of little things in here that are intentional and meant to teach us about the Lord and what He gives us. It's interesting that the only person who was judged was the person who did nothing. There is no loss in this parable, only success, except for when you don't try. It's interesting that everybody succeeded. Not just succeeded, but doubled what the master had given him. This is likely on purpose, in my opinion. The Lord is the one who gives the growth. That isn't to say we shouldn't learn what the Lord wants. If you look at the parable, the guy who was judged knew who the Lord was and chose to go against that. And that really seems to be what anchored the Lord, that he knew the Lord was going to come back and call upon these things that the Lord had given. And he did nothing with them. So for us, for me, I don't get to decide what growth looks like. I don't get to decide how the Lord is going to honor that growth. I don't get to decide what success looks like either. At the end of the day, the return is ultimately the Lord's to decide. He's the one who gives the talents. And, the parable is in an understanding, or the parable is in a language that we understand. He gives them money and they're to go get a return. But what that means for us is so much more complicated, and we don't have a way to measure what that looks like. How do you measure talent? We don't get to decide what that looks like. How do you measure talent? How do you measure growth? How do you measure return? Should that be in ears opened? Should that be in people saved? Should that be in intelligence and wisdom learned? The master, gets to decide those things if it's the return that he wants. And we need to be faithful to seek the return that the master wants, because he is going to call that debt. But as I set out to do this YouTube and other creative endeavors, I don't get to decide what growth looks like. I don't get to decide what success looks like. All I can do is be faithful. And I want to be faithful. I want to be useful. People have encouraged me in different ways over the years that I have particular talents or skills that I should use in particular ways. And so I'm setting out to do that. And if this amounts to nothing, that's okay. Because I'm not doing it for me. I'm not doing it to chase some dream that's going to add to my value statements. My value statements are in the Lord. He is the one who gave me the money of that parable. He's the one who has implanted me with the good that he wants me to use. And I don't want to have nothing to lay at my master's feet when he comes back, even if it's a bunch of lame YouTube videos. I want to be able to say, I tried. I did my best. So I'm not looking for likes. It would be nice. There's obviously, as part of complex human beings and sinful emotions, that want to transition my motivations from godliness to self-indulgence and pride. But I get to decide my motivations, and my motivations in this are to honor the Lord and to make much of him. So hopefully you got a little something out of that. I have other value statements and motivations that I want to talk about, and hopefully you'll see those.